Greetings, I am Ralph D. Capitan and my presentation is about the history of Kodak Company. This is the outline of my presentation. Kodak is an interesting case when analyzing corporate failures. Once the founder of snapshot photography and supplier of many related products, Kodak has filed for bankruptcy in January 2012. Despite having invented the first digital camera back in the 1980s, it is exactly this disruptive technology that caused its final downturn. The purpose of this presentation is to describe the historical development of Kodak and identify the key events, strategic decisions, as well as organizational factors that led to the decline of Kodak from its founding in 1892 over its market domination till the 1980s and till its decline in the 2000s. The history. Kodak was founded by George Eastman. Eastman was born in 1854. As an early school dropout, he started several careers. Eventually, by the age of 24, he started to experiment with photographic emulsion formulas in order to make photography simpler, cheaper, and more accessible to the mass market. By 1880, Eastman began commercial manufacture of dry plates. Businessman Henry A. Strong was impressed by its success. On January 1881, Eastman and Strong partnership to form Eastman Dry Plate Company. So how Eastman did it? Mainly by innovations towards affordable technology. By 1880, Eastman developed a new, less sensitive dry plate formula and patented the respective processes in order to be able to produce them in larger quantity. Thereafter, he started to produce dry plates in Rochester, New York, and eventually developed the film roll, which revolutionized the film market. He introduced Kodak handheld camera preloaded with film in 1888. Finally, he founded the Eastman Kodak Company in 1892 and started to develop and sell film and cameras for the mass market. So Eastman was the first person to invent the roll films. So he patented the first roll film in 1884 and started manufacturing paper film in the name of Kodak by 1885. By 1889, he invented the perforated celluloid film, which we have started seeing. The Eastman Kodak Company was founded in 1892, and by targeting non-photographers, Kodak created a huge market. For Eastman, the initial goal was to make picture taking affordable to everyone. Thereby, he wanted to make the camera as convenient as a pencil. For this reason, he focused on continuously improving his products in order to guarantee the best picture quality for its customers. This original Kodak camera of 1888, introduced by George Eastman, placed the power of photography in the hands of anyone who could press a button. Unlike earlier cameras that used a glass plate negative for each exposure, the Kodak came preloaded with a 100 exposure roll of flexible film. After finishing the roll, the consumer mailed the camera back to the factory to have the prints made. With the introduction of Kodak camera in 1888, Eastman established the basic building block for the amateur photography market. This preloaded camera for 100 photos was sold at a low price and had to be sent back to Kodak in order to print out the photos and reload the camera with a new film. With the slogan, "You press the button, we do the rest," Kodak was able to simplify the photography process and make it accessible to the masses. This trend was prosecuted by the development of the Brownie camera in 1900, a low-cost cardboard box camera for $1 that initiated the snapshot market. Demise of Eastman. With the clear vision in mind and the passion to develop and improve the products, Eastman was able to create a general demand for a newly introduced commodity which did not exist back then. As the amateur photography market developed, taking pictures became a central element of everyday life. The capturing of memorable lifetime moments thereby also became known as the Kodak moment. By the beginning of the 1930s, Eastman got sick by a disease called spinal stenosis, which strongly impacted his everyday life. As the pain became unbearable and his company was prospering, he committed suicide on March 14, 1932, leaving a single note that says, "My work is done. Why wait?" The success of Kodak continued even after George Eastman passed away. In 1935, Kodak developed its iconic Kodachrome film, the first successful mass-market color film that lasted for over 70 years until 2009. With continuous investments into R&D, Kodak continued to develop new products and dominate the world photography market way into the 1980s. In general, Kodak's business model was based on two pillars: the developing and selling of high quality film and the printing of photographs with state of the art technology. Additional Kodak technologies used in World War II. Over this period, Kodak developed a film that could detect radiation as well as X-ray imaging. Furthermore, during World War II, it used the microfilm technology, enabling the US military to considerably shrink the mail volume. So these two technologies were used by the US armed forces during World War II. Even the first pictures of the Earth from orbit were taken by a Kodak camera and film. Thereby, by the end of 1960s, the entire photography industry was determined and dominated by Kodak. Organizational properties during the rise. The main strategy of Kodak during its first 100 years of existence was a razor blade strategy. Kodak focused mainly on developing its film products while providing low-cost cameras to the mass market. The main source for revenue was selling of films and the printing of high-quality photographs. They were a film company. Equipment was okay as long as it drove the consumables. The structure and culture. Kodak developed a highly centralized autocratic structure. Autocratic structure led to a huge inflexible bureaucracy which caused a general stodginess and slowness of decision making. These factors slowed down the development of new products and the move into new businesses. Even though Kodak was able to continuously invent new products, the rather closed hierarchical culture hindered the sharing of knowledge. Until 1981, Kodak's dominance of global photography industry can be traced back to the continuous improvement of its core film products and experimentation with various different technologies in related fields. However, the hierarchy within the company became a huge burden for flexible and innovative solutions. These properties slowly weakened Kodak's organizational structures and the ability to react to fundamental changes in the external environment. However, five important events happened around this time which changed the course of everything. Event number one: Steven Sasson, who is an engineer in Kodak, developed a portable, battery operated, self contained digital camera at Kodak in 1975. It weighed around 3.6 kg and used a Fairchild CCD image sensor which is having 0.01 megapixel resolutions. The images were digitally recorded onto a cassette tape, a process that took 23 seconds per image. His camera took images in black and white. What he envisioned for the future was a camera without moving mechanical parts, although his device did have moving parts such as the tape drive. Sasson was inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame in 2011 and later elected as a Fellow of the National Academy of Inventors in 2018. Kodak's leadership rejected the digital camera, fearing it would cannibalize existing business. As Sasson later told the New York Times, it was filmless photography. So management's reaction was, that's cute, but don't tell anyone about it. Event number two is the Bayer filter. This was introduced by Bryce Bayer, another Kodak engineer, in 1976. It features a checkered board arrangement of red, green, blue filters that enable a single CCD or CMOS imaging sensor to capture color images. The three color filters in the Bayer's array are needed to create color from the grayscale image information that's captured by the imaging chip. Prior to Bayer's invention, three separate sensors attached to a beam splitter were required to capture a color image, but that setup was too large and expensive to find mass appeal. Bayer's more economical array is designed to mimic how the human eye perceives color, with a filter pattern of 25% red, 50% green, and 25% blue, which later typically became known as the RGB. The color filters are fabricated directly on top of the light-sensitive pixels in the image sensor as it's manufactured. An image captured with a Bayer filter camera is known as a Bayer pattern image. This raw sensor output must then be interpolated using demosaicing algorithms for the sensor to produce an accurate image with full red, green, and blue image data for every pixel. Along with his color imaging work, Bayer developed key algorithms for storing, enhancing, and printing digital images. The Bayer filter array was patented in 1976. The third event was on August 25, 1981, Sony unveiled a prototype of the Sony Mavica as the world's first electronic still video camera. Its CCD sensor produced an analog video signal in NTSC format at a resolution of 0.28 megapixel. Mavipack 2.0 disc, later industry-wide adopted as video floppy, were used to write 50 still frames onto the tracks on disk. The pictures could be shown on a television screen using a special playback viewer unit plugged into the television set. Event number 4 is the entry of Fuji films into the American market. In fact, Kodak was present as a sponsor during the first Olympic Games in Athens in 1896. At the Olympics, the most famous contemporary consumer brands are exposed. For many decades, Kodak's presence on the Olympics was more or less taken for granted. Fuji competed with Kodak initially with lower scales of margin in the 90s. The critical element in Fujifilm's success is diversification. In 2010, the film market dropped to less than 10% compared to 2000. But Fujifilm, which once made 60% of its sales with film, diversified successfully and managed to grow its revenue by 57% over this 10 years period, while Kodak sales fell by 48%. And the final event was the entry of smartphones, in particular the iPhone in 2006. And this was a death bell for standalone cameras, as is evident from this graph. So, how the giant failed? Kodak had a long history of cultivating and embracing risky innovations. George Eastman, the company's founder, recognized this when he pivoted Kodak's core business from dry plates to film and from black and white to color, despite hitting profitable product lines in the short term. Decades later, Kodak blew its chance to lead the digital photography revolutions. They got things half right. Kodak engineer Steve Sasson actually invented the digital camera in the company's R&D labs in the 1970s. How Kodak quashed its brightest idea. Stage 1. Hubris born of success until 1984. In the first stage of decline, a company is becoming highly successful and the people believe that it will continue regardless of what the company's future decisions are. The company tends to have a certain degree of arrogance. In the case of Kodak, this kind of behavior can be observed way back in the 1970s. Based on its ongoing success, Kodak started to ignore the threat of any competitors and strictly believed in the superiority of its own products. Beside the internal inefficiencies, Kodak also faced rising competition from new market entrants, first and foremost from Fuji Photofilm Corporation. Fuji was the main competitor in the imaging business and steadily increased its global film market share throughout the 90s until it eventually overcame Kodak around 2001. Furthermore, Kodak faced serious competition in its other business segments. With the rise of new digital technologies, Kodak's core imaging business became more and more threatened. New competitors like Sony steadily gained in power, while Kodak kept missing the chance of hopping on the newly emerging digital trends. Lastly, new printing giants like Hewlett Packard and Xerox got a lock on printers. As the later CEO Antonio Perez says, a notion that is based on the success was that maybe if Kodak doesn't move into digital, the imaging world will never move into digital. As it turns out, this notion was based on strong hubris and ignorance of reality. Stage 2 is undisciplined pursuit of more. During this second stage, Kodak still performed above average and enjoyed rising stock value. The main source of income was still the selling of high quality film. Research and development remained focused on products related to film production and development, which caused the company to fall behind rivals like Polaroid and Xerox in the development of instant cameras and photocopiers. Kodak also strongly diversified during this period. Starting from an imaging and printing business, it acquired a copier business from IBM, a clinical diagnostics for in vitro blood analyzers, mass memory for producing floppy disks, and even Sterling Drug, a pharmaceutical company. Overall, Kodak did pursue an undisciplined diversification in order to answer the increasing competition in its core business. Stage 3. Denial of risk and peril. In this third stage, the decline of the organization becomes slightly visible. Nevertheless, leaders tend to amplify the positive and ignore the negative data. They set big goals and take decisions without fundamental empirical validation, exposing the organization to high risks. In 1993, M.C. Fisher became the first external CEO of Kodak from Motorola. He disinvested all unrelated businesses and focused on imaging. He wanted to offer digital products throughout the whole value chain of imaging, including capturing, digitization, storing, printing, and sharing. After all, Fisher introduced a lot of new products for the digital photography, but they could not make up for the loss of revenue from the film selling business. In 2001, Kodak lost $60 on every digital camera sold. Stage 4. Grasping for salvation. In the fourth stage, the demise of the organization is now fully visible and the management needs to take the right decisions in order to prevent further decline. From January 2000, Kodak was about to lose its market share majority to Fuji in traditional film-based markets. Rivals like Fuji, Canon, Sony increased their market share. Post 2006, after the launch of smartphones and iPhones, there is a drastic drop in Kodak market share. Finally, the fifth stage, which is capitulation to irrelevance. In this fifth stage, the financial strength of the company has declined by so much that it has reached a point of no return. The final stage of Kodak's decline starts with the end of production of the Kodachrome film in 2009. By giving up the production of this film, Kodak reached a point of no return. As affordable digital cameras were replaced by mobile phones, the sale of digital cameras dropped drastically, leaving Kodak with nothing else to sell. Furthermore, high-end SLR cameras were and still are dominated by other competitors like Canon and Sony. Kodak lost its source of steady cash flow and wasn't able to establish a sustainable digital brand. It was only a matter of time until Kodak had to file for bankruptcy, which happened in January 2012. Conclusion: Eastman's business ideology was to develop technology to make the product more affordable to the masses rather than niche markets with lower sales. Kodak should have realized that digital technology is not a threat but much more the next step in making image taking and sharing of lifetime moments more convenient for everyone. The Kodak moment could have been digital, but Kodak acted too late. A market leader can never be complacent and has to reinvent itself every few years. Thank you.